RedBull Racing is a name I'm sure we're all very familiar with, from winning 4 championships in a row during the Vettel era and cultivating a young championship-winning talent in Max Verstappen. It's clear that Red Bull has cemented itself in history as one of the greatest constructors, but today we're going to see just how they became so successful and learn a bit about the people who paved the way. The start of the story of Red Bull doesn't actually begin with the Red Bull company or even the late Dietrich Mateschitz, but it began with the Stewart GP team, with the namesake of F1 legend Jackie Stewart. Spending 3 seasons in F1, the team was far from successful. For Stewart, it was a successful weekend if the car managed to finish the race, as the team was sold to Ford in 1999. Ford would rebrand the team to Jaguar Racing Team. However, this rebrand and the involvement of Ford would not end up doing the company any favors, as the team was plagued with managerial issues and poor performances. In 2004, Ford decided that they were done in Formula 1 and sold the Jaguar team to Red Bull, along with 3 seasons worth of Ford's valuable Cosworth engines. Despite the new takeover, this isn't Red Bull's first time being involved in F1. For years until this point, they had been involved as a sponsor for the Sauber F1 team. After taking over the team, owner Dietrich Mateschitz would install Christian Horner as the new team principal. He would then sign David Coulthard and Christian Klein to drive for the team in 2005. In Red Bull's maiden year, they continued to use the Cosworth engines that Jaguar had used, and David Coulthard was considered a major contributor to Red Bull's development. Red Bull's first season was a surprisingly good one, finishing 6th in the Constructors compared to Jaguar's 7th. Even though this stat line doesn't seem all that impressive, in its first season, Red Bull was able to amass more points than Jaguar in 2003 and 2004. In 2006, Red Bull would abandon the old Cosworth engines, opting to go with the 3rd place Ferrari engine, and continued to use the Michelin tires instead of Bridgestone. However, the biggest change would be made to Red Bull in the offseason was the hiring of Adrian Newey, a highly successful technical director from McLaren. In the first race of the 2006 F1 season, Red Bull would be plagued by cooling issues that would place David Coulthard at the back of the field. Despite this, Klein was able to qualify 8th, but would collide with Kimi Räikkönen on the opening lap, ending his race. The rest of the season was plagued with engine reliability issues and low finishes. The team would place the season in 7th with 16 points, leading Williams by 5. Despite the many reliability issues, Red Bull continued to use the Ferrari engine because the outfit was still under contract. This would be the very first car that Adrian Newey would have complete creative control over, and the expectations were high. Along with that, the team would announce that they were dropping Christian Klein and signing Australian driver Mark Webber to drive alongside David Coulthard. Unfortunately, much of the 2007 season was once again plagued by reliability issues with the Ferrari engine, along with the mid-season signing of Jeff Willis. This did spark a turnaround near the end of the season, as Webber would finish 3rd at the Nürburgring and Coulthard would get 4th in Japan. The pair would also both score points in China with a 9th and 5th finish. This season would end up being a big step forward, as the team would finish 5th in the Constructors. In 2008, more change came to Red Bull, as the team would leave the trouble-ridden Ferrari engine behind and began a partnership with Renault to supply their engines. The 2008 season would begin in stellar fashion for Red Bull, as Mark Webber would string together 5 straight point finishes and David Coulthard would get a podium in Canada. However, after the halfway point, it was clear that Red Bull couldn't keep up with its competitors. A problem often attributed to the Renault engine was the lack in power compared to Mercedes and Ferrari. To rub salt in the wound, Red Bull's sister team, Toro Rosso, would beat them to the punch and become the first Red Bull-owned team to win a Grand Prix weekend. The season would end on a sad note, as longtime driver David Coulthard would retire at the end of the 2008 season, leaving Red Bull with an empty seat. However, they knew just the man to fill it. In the 2009 season, Red Bull would sign Sebastian Vettel, their winner from the Italian Grand Prix the year before. Even though expectations were high, Vettel delivered, securing pole and the win in the 2009 Chinese Grand Prix, with Webber qualifying in 3rd, finishing 2nd in the same weekend. After this weekend, the Red Bull drivers would string together great performance after great performance, with many podiums and points finishes for both drivers. Even another win with Mark Webber, the pair would cap off the season with a 1-2 finish, with Vettel taking the win. Red Bull would finish 2nd in the Constructors' Championship, only 18.5 points behind Braun GP. Riding high off the 2009 season, in 2010, Red Bull would retain their driver lineup, also retaining the partnership with Renault. Although the season would start off with nothing but problems for Red Bull, as Vettel would suffer reliability issues and Webber would struggle in qualifying, things would begin to turn around in Monaco, as Webber would qualify on pole and Vettel in 3rd. Vettel would pass Robert Kubica on the first lap and hold the position to complete the 1-2 finish. Red Bull would go on a string of pole positions and wins, causing them to move to the front of the Constructors' Championship, and Mark Webber would lead the Drivers' Championship. Championship. During the Turkish Grand Prix, the two Red Bull drivers would crash into each other and end both their races. Vettel would recover in Silverstone with a win from pole position, and the rest of the season was dominated by the Austrian outfit, as Sebastian Vettel would go on to win the Drivers' Championship and Red Bull would win the Constructors' Championship. In the coming years to follow, the duo of Vettel and Webber would consistently compete for wins and podiums, as the pair would rack up a total of 4 Constructors' Championships together and 4 Drivers' titles, all of them going to Seb. Unfortunately, the pair would be broken up in 2014 after Mark Webber announced that he'd be leaving Red Bull to go drive Porsche in the World Endurance Championship. For the first time in 5 years, Red Bull had his seat open, and it was promptly filled by Daniel Ricciardo, aka the Honey Badger. However, the Renault engine that the team had relied on through their championship-winning years was once again falling behind the 8 compared to the Ferrari and the Mercedes, most notably having reliability issues and a lack of horsepower. Despite the lack of production in the engine department, the Ricciardo and Vettel pairing came through and was able to deliver in multiple weekends, managing to put together a total of 405 championship points, a distant second to the dominant Mercedes. The engine was so bad, Red Bull team principal Christian Horner had this to say about it. Unacceptable. The big difference between Mercedes and Renault is that when a driver with a Mercedes engine pushes the overtake button, his car goes faster. When our drivers, who have Renault engines, push the button, the car stops. The bad news would continue to pile up on Horner's shoulders, as Vettel would announce that he was leaving the team for Ferrari in 2015, meaning his spot would need to be filled by Daniel Kvyat, a former Red Bull Jr., currently of Toro Rosso. With the young driver lineup of Ricciardo and Kvyat, the season would be one to forget, as the Renault engine continued to disappoint both fans and Red Bull management. It was clear that the car would have to be much faster in order to get the most out of their young driver lineup if they wanted to bring the fight to Mercedes, Ferrari, and Williams. The next season, Christian Horner would very publicly end the partnership with both Renault and Infiniti on the grounds of poor performance. Instead, the team would form a partnership with Tag Heuer and Aston Martin to improve the already purchased Renault engines. This would prove to be a pivotal decision, as in 2016 the team would return to its winning ways, but not without some more controversy, as midway through the season, Daniel Kvyat was replaced for Max Verstappen. The season would bring Red Bull 2 more wins, once with Daniel, another with Max, proving that they have found their Vettel-Webber replacement sooner than expected. For the next 2 seasons, the Verstappen-Ricciardo driver duo would prove to be one of the best on the grid, bringing home many podiums and wins. However, things would change in 2019. After feeling that he wouldn't be able to win a championship with Red Bull, Daniel departed for Renault, and Pierre Gasly was selected to replace Daniel. Along with other driver changes, Christian would negotiate a deal to begin using Honda manufactured engines. The season would prove to be nothing special for Red Bull. However, there was some major controversy, as driver Pierre Gasly would struggle to adjust to the pressure and was replaced mid-season by Alex Albon. The team would finish third in the constructors, behind Ferrari and Mercedes. 2020 was much of the same for Red Bull, as they would retain the Verstappen-Albon pairing. However, this did them no favors, as Albon would also fail to adjust to the pressure of being on a top team, delivering mediocre performances. Until now, the team hasn't been able to find a solid replacement for Daniel Ricciardo in order to make a true run for a title, and it was looking that trend might continue. However, this wasn't true, as a lifeline had fallen to them in the form of Sergio Perez. He would go on to win the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix in his last race with Racing Point, currently Aston Martin. With the brand new, more experienced driver lineup, the season seemed hopeful. Turns out, that hope was well placed, as Red Bull would go on to have their best season since 2013, and bring a true title fight to the likes of Mercedes and Ferrari. The 2021 season would see a fight between Lewis Hamilton and Max Verstappen that would ultimately be won by Max Verstappen in the Abu Dhabi Grand Prix, with help from Sergio. Unfortunately, Mercedes would still win the constructors, but this proved that Red Bull was truly back to its winning ways. In 2022, Red Bull would retain both Verstappen and Perez, and even though the beginning of the season was rocky, being challenged fiercely by Ferrari, after some mid-season upgrades, the Red Bull was clearly head and shoulders faster. Red Bull would go on to win both the Constructors and Drivers' Championships in 2022. 2023 would be the most dominant season we'll ever see from a constructor and a driver, as Max Verstappen would go on to win 10 straight Grand Prix weekends, and Red Bull as a whole would only lose 1 race in the season. The Red Bull team would end up winning 22 races out of the 22 race season, taking home the Constructors' Championship. And currently, this is where the team stands. Despite some minor driver controversy this season surrounding Sergio Perez, with the amount of driving talent surrounding that team, with names like Daniel Ricciardo, Yuki Tsunoda, and Liam Lawson, finding a replacement won't be an issue, assuming Perez doesn't have a return to form in 2024. If you made it to the end of the video, I want to say thank you, as this was a long one. If you liked it, consider giving it a like, and if you want to see more, consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks again, and have a great day.